Okay, all right, so where are we at? So we're back, first Treehouse Conference, right? The first thing that we did in the conference was we tested all the things that we were at that time using to build the treehouse. And basically, we were testing mostly lag bolts and eye bolts, and then one of the first, improvements that I made, which has gone with the peacock perch, was I put channel on the trees, and then bolted that channel to the trees, and then bolted the logs or beams to the trees. Originally, before that, kids' tree houses were just done by actually nailing boards to a tree, right? And a couple of things would happen with that. The wind would tear those boards apart, pull those boards off. Sometimes if they put enough nails in there, the tree would pull the nails through the tree as the bark comes out from the tree. As the force of the bark pushes out, it would pull the nails through the tree, and sometimes the nails were enough and the board was enough that it held up against the bark, and the bark got included, and it grew around the tree. One of the experiments that we have is up the hill that we'll check into later this weekend, where we put a strap around the tree, put a cable on it, held it there. We started off, it had 500 pounds of tension on it, and 4 or 5 years later it's at 1,740 pounds of pressure. And it's grown around it. So we've cut that tree down, and we'll be dissecting it here later on this weekend. Okay, so one of the big things was to, learn about how to build a better tree house. So we took the philosophy of sharing our knowledge, not being competitive. A lot of industries are competitive. In the treehouse industry, I don't know. Well, there's one guy that kind of but and that's where the tab came from. Okay? Originally, how the GL was created, or how it came about, was the attempt to build a better mousetrap. Okay, so and we're going to go around, and I'm going to show you. We're going to start with the peacock perch and show you what's happened. That thing's been up there for almost 30 years, going on 30 years. And we're going to continue. We've had to replace the 2 main beams on it, the 2 main joists on it. We're going to put another beam in it and pretty much be done with the retrofitting on it. But that's going to happen on this weekend. We're going to start there. We're going to go around and show you the different progress of all the different tree houses and what's happened over the last 30 years. Up front here we have, back in after the first conference, I got with Charlie Greenwood. That was the guy that was on the phone, all right? He's the main engineer that's been working with the treehouse industry for the last 28 years. Actually, longer than that. I tried to get him, when the county ordered me to tear down this treehouse back in 1994, I went to Charlie, and I went to Charlie when they told me they wouldn't give me a permit for them. I asked them about getting a permit at the county, and they said, no, you can't get a permit for a treehouse. No treehouse in the world has a permit except for the one at Disneyland. And I says, well, what's the matter with that then? Isn't this a Mickey Mouse County? They didn't like that.
That was the beginning of the end?
They'd already told me I couldn't do it, so.
Why not, right?
But what Charlie said was, well, at least you should be able to, but you at least build it to code as much as you can. And that's what I did, and I'm glad I took that advice, and I would say, for any of you that are gonna build a tree house, just because it's a tree house, doesn't mean you should not build it to high safety standards, and good construction standards. It should be engineered right. Now, the problem why the county said that you can't get a permit is because its foundation is a tree. All right, and it's not covered in the building codes. It's not concrete, masonry, or treated wood, so therefore you can't get a permit. All right? Well, a tree is, you're using the tree as your foundation. Thing is, it's a living foundation. Okay, so it being living, meaning then we get into the biology, and that's where we get in with Scott, and and that's the big, that's the big difference with it. So once you get your foundation set, your platform set, and how you anchor to that tree is as far as from an engineering standpoint or a safety standpoint, that's where the big crux of it lies. And that's what this place is. Over 30 years, you can see all the different ways of doing that and what's happened over those 30 years, and how what that does, what time does, because basically, usually you build your foundation on a house, it's protected from the weather, and they have standards for all that, and they've got that all worked out. But for tree houses, it's just been 30 years that we've been actually just looking at this, and have more evidence of it. And so there's just a lot of different factors, and it's a living foundation. So that's what we'll be going around and looking at. So the one thing was to build a better mousetrap, so to speak. Okay, so the better mousetrap was after the first Treehouse Conference, was talking with Charlie Greenwood and a guy by the name of Jonathan Farrow, which is actually a pioneer in this business. But we said, well, next year let's come back and let's try to simulate. It was Charlie's idea of trying to simulate what a limb is like, because trees they hold up these limbs, and from an engineering standpoint, a limb is quite a unique structure that a lot of times it can hang way out there and hold up all this weight. So the next year we came back and we tested all different kinds of attachments, and that's what we have up here. All right, and we'll come back to this. You can ask me about this stuff here later, but we're going to go walk around first, and then we can come back and you can ask me questions about these different attachment points and how they happen and how they work and how it got up to the next level. But we're going to see the progression of those in this place as we walk around.
Michael, was there a turning point with the county that enabled you to get a permit, and what was that, if it was, or was it a bunch of different things?
Well, just remember, this was a different era.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you, Michael showed up at the county dressed as Abe Lincoln, pleaded his own case.
That was a different thing. That had to do with a whole different product.
Okay.
That didn't have to do with the tree houses. Okay, with the tree
I got confused.
with the tree houses, it was, well, you guys you've heard of the watchtowers?
Yeah.
Okay, the watchtowers were these towers, a tower that was in Los Angeles, or Watts, California. And it was a structure that this guy built that was kind of this godly thing that the county condemned and said that you got to tear this thing down. Well, they went to go tear it down, and they couldn't tear it down. They went to try to pull it down, they couldn't tear it down. And so therefore, because they thought said it was unsafe, it wouldn't stay up there, they tried to pull it down, couldn't pull it down, so they determined that, well, I guess it's safe. it's strong enough, you know? So, and that was a stress test, basically. So I just decided to do a stress test to show that the treehouse, they had condemned this treehouse because they said I couldn't prove that it, you know, that it wasn't safe, you know, and wasn't permitted. They were implying that it wasn't safe. So the turning point was that I pulled this, put together this was on the 4th of July. Basically, they told me that I had to tear it down by the 5th of July. I had a cease and desist. I said, well, then I still have the 4th of July, right? So we can have an independence party. You know, and it was a travesty what they were doing to us, you know? So I called together all my friends and everything. And
Your parents are closest, the ones you cared the most about.
but actually, I put up 10,000 pounds of water
Oh, okay.
before I asked for them to all get for 10,000 pounds.
We
of
hired
food.
a retired guy from the Department of Weights and Measures who weighed everything that went up in the house. So it was 10,000 pounds of water
10,000
plus
562 pounds. All right, 2 dogs, 66 people, 2 dogs, a cat.
66 people.
2 dogs, a cat, and we're not sure if the hummingbird lighted or not.
Plus the water?
No, the water weight already taken down, but I had put 10,000 pounds of water up there before I had 10,000 pounds of people. Right. And
Michael, what was the stress load on that? Did you take a reading on that once you had the 10,000 pounds in there?
well, that's what it needed.
He did. He was like,
Well, yeah, it stayed there.
very sophisticated test.
Yeah, we had cameras out here. It was actually a tree ring circus. We had ABC, NBC, and CBS, you know,
Okay.
and we had the Associated Press, and actually that went national, you know. So for the 4th of July news, you know, it was, and they backed off then. So that made them go, okay, all right. And basically I did it with the turning point was what I call publicity. And this is what I would suggest if you ever get problems with your county or your officials, is that you use publicity on it. Because remember, most everybody likes tree houses. Even Republicans like tree houses. It's just government officials that have a problem with it. Okay? So that they don't, a lot of times, municipalities and everything don't want to have to deal with them because they don't understand them, for one. So if you make them small enough, they'll try to slip you in this, you know, back doors or ignore you. But if the neighbor, sometimes neighbors don't like tree houses because you're looking into their backyard from a tree. You know, they feel like you're invading their privacy. So that's one of the things that you should check with before you build. Try to get your neighbor's approval. Or if you have a client, make sure that they talk to them. Okay, so we are now back to, I guess let's start walking around. Oh,
Let's do a quick thing about the artificial bolts.
okay.
So when Charlie and Michael and me, as the minor contributor, the tree biology guy, got going this, they originally called these GL, an L meaning limb. So everybody should know that it is not like the limb of a tree. Okay? So
My first name for him was Artificial Limb.
yeah, artificial limb.
But actually Jake would tell that story. He didn't like that name. He thought it was too artificial.
Okay, here's a tree with a branch, a limb. And if you've split wood or been around carpentry for a while, you have to be familiar with this. So the knot in the wood, what is the knot in the wood that you're dealing with? A branch, right? Is the wood different in the knot than it is in the surrounding xylem? Very different, right? Okay, so down here, we'll put in a pin. So with a branch in springtime, branch actually expands in size first, okay? So the branch will get a little bigger every year, adds a increment of growth, a tree ring, okay? And then the tree will do the same thing, the trunk of the tree. So when that occurs, that's why if you've ever tried to pull a branch out of a tree, it's very hard to do. If you've been around a hurricane or a tornado or a severe storm, snow loads, you may have seen a branch pulled out of a tree, leaving behind a socket. And the socket is made of the wood of the trunk of the tree, the xylem, okay? So with a branch, every year, branch grows, tree grows, and the thing is built together in a very, very solid fashion. And tree biologists, tree biomechanics science study people, we've actually pulled branches out of trees and played around with stuff like that. So it's extremely strong connection. So down here I added a ring to the tree and growth increment to the tree around the pin, okay, the tree attachment bolt. And you can see that I drew that ring starting to try to cover over. In actuality, each of my little rings, I just pretend that that's several years, more than one, okay? So you're going to have this issue that occurs over time where with the branch will just continue to do its thing. Tree getting bigger, branch getting bigger. But down here, when the xylem hits the pin, it's eventually going to envelop the pin, right? If you've done this right, you didn't install it the way I drew it here, flush with the tree. You left plenty of pins sticking out to accommodate the growth of the tree. Okay? So then let's introduce one more concept of tree biology and biomechanics, and this is that trees are considered self-optimizing structures. And this means that as they take in energy from the soil and the sun and build the structure of the tree, they're going to add material to counter all of the forces that are put onto the tree. Number one force, who knows what the number one force is?
Gravity.
Gravity, okay? Every engineer should know this. So tree engineers need to know it too. So gravity, wind is generally considered the next greatest force that commonly causes issues for trees. But then rainfall, snowfall, ice loads, people, tree houses, all these things will add a load to the tree. When the leaves come on to the tree, a fairly significant load is added to the branches, okay? Not only are the leaves there with a little weight themselves, but they add to the surface area, the load gathering area of the tree, okay? So, this means that if Michael's the tree and I'm the prevailing wind and I push on him all the time, and he happens to be a Douglas fir, Michael is going to get stronger on the compression side of the tree. Okay? If he was a maple tree and I did this, he would get stronger on the tension side of the tree. And the strength is manifested in growth of the wood of the tree, the xylem. Okay? So if you add a big load onto a pin like this in a tree, what do you think the tree might do? It's going to get stronger. How does it do that? More growth. So if you looked at your tree or knew from either your own knowledge or getting an arborist to help you, knew the rough growth rates of the trees that you're working in, and you think, well, I want to leave enough room there for my tree to grow 20 years at least until I have to dink around with the tree house, then you might get fooled because after you add, if it's a heavy dead load on the tree will add more material right in that area. This means that your pin is going to be enveloped faster than you thought. Okay? So let's just stop there and go look at some examples. What do you think? Well, let's just look at one thing. Michael, hand me that piece of wood, that arbutus right down there, please. So, whoa, geez, I'm glad I asked Michael to pick that up. Come on. That's a brutal thing. So this is a piece of Arbutus benzicii. For those of you who aren't from the Northwest, that's Pacific Madrone. And you notice I used the Latin name. So the third little tree biology concept that we're going to get out right now is that every tree species is different, sometimes very different in its characteristics. And the same tree species, in other words, this Douglas fir, for instance, growing in a very different environment, that tree is going to have very different characteristics. So the Douglas fir growing on a west-facing talus slope in Idaho, and the Douglas fir in the Pacific Northwest rainforest near the Hoh River, they're going to be very different when you look at the wood characteristics and the way the tree grows, the form that it takes, etc. So we talked about the pin. This is actually a dissection from a treehouse repair where the arbutus tree grew up and enveloped a rail, a handrail. So Frank's one of my favorite students over the years, and he thought, well, we ought to save this. But what you can see here is what one famous tree guy, Klaus Maddock, calls the kiss of the tree. But anyhow, the tree basically could not push the rail away, and the tree reacted by enveloping the rail. It didn't get all the way, so when Frank got the tree out there, he just popped it off. And everybody's seen this. This is a very important thing to think about if you're going to build in trees.
How many years is that?
Many years.
Oh, yeah, well,
15 years?
yeah, let's see, 2000 is when I started building this walkway.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
yeah,
a
15
long time.
years, 15, 16, 17 years.
And with the right kind, so if so, does anybody think that you might be able to answer that question with high degree of accuracy? Yeah, if you dissected this piece, it'd be tough with arbutus because it's not an easy tree to read the rings. But you could do it, especially if you had a microscope and a good dendro guy or gal. If you sliced this open, you could probably tell what year that the tree first made contact with the railing. Okay? Okay. Where do you want to go first, Michael?
Okay, well,
How about the oak tree right here? They don't even have to get up. Your experiment.
that one there shows what are the first. We're going to show you the first types of tree houses where we put a bracket on the tree and bolted it in. Those weren't very intrusive at the beginning, but we'll show you how intrusive they became over time. The thing with a GL or a tab is that it can be intrusive in the beginning, but becomes less intrusive over time. And if you look up there, you see how the tree is grown around it and enveloped it, put it inside. It becomes like, one of the things I found is with trees and metal is they get along really well together. They don't, it doesn't poison the tree doesn't seem to mind it. It grows up wide right up there. So, yeah, let's go and take a look at the peacock first. Don't show you some of these others that have lobes on them. That one doesn't have any lobes on them.
Okay.
Yeah.